The thing about wayfinding is that if it's done properly, it makes everything a breeze. I'm Susan Bennett, and I am a wayfinding specialist. So Kadlec is a regional hospital in the Tri-Cities in Washington State. Initially, what brought Takeform in was their garage. They were finding that getting the traffic to flow correctly for people who wanted to go directly to the emergency room or to use the hospital had to be resolved in some creative way so that from the street you had wayfinding that guided people correctly. So we went in and completely revamped the entire parking garage. We created a traffic flow for non-emergency and a traffic flow for emergency. The garage project took about a year, and that's pretty average, because you have seasons, so you have to be very cognizant of how the signage is going to work in the weather, because it's an exposed garage, which is unusual because they get very bitter, windy winters. And then you have sight lines that you have to consider when you're trying to figure out how you want to get people in. So you want to spend some time studying that traffic flow. Once the garage was finished, they brought us back to do the whole entire hospital, which was a much bigger project than the garage. Because of these very, very, very long corridors that connect the different wings of the building, people get lost. And what happens with very long corridors is there's usually multiple entries to the buildings, and the hospital itself didn't want the traffic coming in from all different directions. So that creates two problems. If you wayfind properly and you guide them in through the primary entrance that you want them to come into, which was, of course, the main entrance, places that are way down at the other end of the hall, like physical therapy, are a very, very long journey. And somebody who's in physical therapy really doesn't have the stamina to walk down very long corridors. So you can start to negotiate with the client and say, well, let's sign for physical therapy at the door you don't want everybody else using, but at least let those patients come through. The other problem was that people, when they were going from one place to the next, had no clue where they were, because there was no sense of differentiation between all the corridors. So we chose color as a solution to that problem. We then created the 4 pavilions, and within those pavilions, each one was assigned a very specific and different color. The vineyard, of course, was a nice deep purple, the orchard was green, the river pavilion was blue, and then the mountain pavilion was brown, and that's primarily back of house, so it wasn't as difficult because the staff comes in that way already. But now you created a visual sense of the space through color. And that works for most people, actually. But then we took that color and made sure that it was in the signage. So every time you went from one pavilion to the next, the signage would change color. So now you always knew, gee, all the signs are brown, I must not be in the right place. I came in where the signs were all green. And instead of using huge graphic panels, which we had initially intended to do, we used paint instead. It was an easier, softer, easier on the eyes, softer approach to creating spaces. They had a palette that they had developed for the signage, but when it was put on the walls, it failed. It was too vivid. While it worked fine on a little 8x8 sign or a 20x18 sign for wayfinding, the color was too powerful. So we worked with them to create that complementary palette so that when you walked in, the colors were comforting and they weren't glaring. It solved the problem of these long corridors all looking the same.